Knightsbridge was a town that lived in the balance between old wealth and new ambition. Its broad, tree-lined streets were adorned with stately, century-old homes that had seen generations of prominent families come and go. The Crosses were one such family. Though their wealth wasn't inherited, it was earned. Nathan Cross had built his empire from the ground up, and in doing so had established his family as one of the town's elite. Nathan's company, Cross Construction and Development, wasn't just another player in the local real estate market. It was a juggernaut that had shaped the very skyline of Knightsbridge and beyond. New civic buildings, shopping centers, upscale residential complexes. Nathan's name was on them all, and with each project his wealth and influence grew. But on the morning of November 13th, Knightsbridge woke to news that shook its polished exterior. Nathan Cross was missing. Amanda Cross, his wife of 18 years, had been the one to report it. She had woken up at 7 a.m. as usual, expecting to find Nathan either in his office downstairs or gone to one of his early meetings. But the house was unusually quiet. Nathan's briefcase, his phone, and the keys to his car were missing. It was as if he had left for work, except for one glaring detail. His car was still parked in the driveway, and none of his business associates had heard from him. Panic set in. Amanda called the police after spending nearly an hour trying to reach him. By 9 a.m., the local media had caught wind of the story, and Knightsbridge was buzzing with speculation. How could a man as powerful and prominent as Nathan simply vanish? Detective Sarah McLean arrived on the scene by noon. Unlike the town's local police force, Sarah wasn't swayed by Knightsbridge's wealth or prestige. She had been assigned to the case due to Nathan's influence, but she treated it like any other missing persons case, with methodical precision and an eye for detail. The Cross Mansion was a sprawling estate that sat on a hill overlooking the town, its high windows reflecting the pale November sky. Sarah stood in the driveway, looking up at the house, wondering what secrets its walls might hold. Amanda greeted Sarah at the door, her face pale but composed. She was the image of grace under pressure, her hair perfectly styled despite the morning's chaos. Her blue eyes held an edge of steel, though, the kind of resilience that came from living in a world where appearances mattered more than emotions. "Detective McLean, thank you for coming," Amanda said, her voice steady but strained. "I don't understand what's happening. Nathan never. He wouldn't just leave like this." Sarah stepped inside, taking in the pristine foyer. Marble floors, a grand staircase, and walls lined with family portraits. A picture-perfect life, or so it seemed. "Mrs. Cross, I understand this is difficult," Sarah began, her tone professional but not unkind. "I'm going to need as much information as possible about your husband's recent behavior. Anything unusual, any changes in his routine." Amanda hesitated, her hands fidgeting slightly as she led Sarah to the living room. "I don't know what to tell you. Nathan's been distracted lately. Preoccupied with work, I thought. He's been taking more meetings, working late nights. But that's not unusual for him. His business is his life." Sarah nodded, making mental notes. "When was the last time you saw him?" "Last night, around 10:30 p.m. He said he was going to review some contracts in his office. I went to bed shortly after. When I woke up this morning, he was gone." Sarah's eyes flicked around the room, noticing the subtle tension in Amanda's posture. There was more to the story. She could feel it. Did he seem anxious? Worried about anything in particular? Amanda bit her lip, then finally spoke. "He's been stressed about this new project. A big contract with the city for a new civic center. There's been some controversy. A few competitors were upset that Cross Construction won the bid. Nathan mentioned a few threats, but he didn't take them seriously." "Threats?" Sarah's ears perked up. "From whom?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted. "He didn't give me details. He brushed it off, said it was just business." Sarah's mind raced. A high-profile businessman, controversial contracts, and now possible threats. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but they were far from a complete picture. "I'll need access to his office," Sarah said. "And his phone records, emails, anything that might give us a clue about where he could have gone or who he was in contact with." Amanda nodded, her composure slipping slightly. Of course, whatever you need. Nathan's office was a study in power and wealth. Dark mahogany furniture, shelves lined with books on business and finance, and a large oak desk that dominated the room. But for all its grandeur, Sarah's instincts told her that this was where the real work happened. She approached the desk, her eyes scanning the surface. Papers were strewn about, contracts and blueprints for upcoming projects. But there was something off. A small locked drawer in the bottom left corner of the desk caught her attention. It wasn't the kind of drawer that one would lock unless there was something important inside. "Do you have the key?" Sarah asked Amanda, who stood in the doorway, watching anxiously. Amanda looked confused. "No, I didn't even know that drawer was locked. Nathan kept certain things private." Sarah frowned but didn't press the issue. She would need a warrant to open it anyway. As she continued her search, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was the local police chief, Jim Murray, calling with an update. "We've spoken to his business partner, Michael Ferris," Jim said. According to Ferris, Nathan had been acting strange for weeks, avoiding meetings, canceling calls. And get this, last Friday, Nathan transferred a large sum of money into an offshore account. Ferris didn't know about it until he checked the company's finances this morning. "Offshore account?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "How much are we talking?" "Close to $5 million, Jim replied. "It's not pocket change. Something's going on here, Sarah." Sarah hung up, her mind racing. $5 million quietly moved into an offshore account just days before Nathan vanished. This was no ordinary disappearance. Something much bigger was at play. As Sarah processed the information about the offshore account, her mind churned with questions. $5 million, it was a massive sum to hide, even for someone as wealthy as Nathan Cross. Was he planning to disappear, or was he being blackmailed? And if so, by whom? The locked drawer in Nathan's office nagged at her, but she knew she couldn't break it open without a warrant. For now, she would need to focus on more immediate leads. The phone records and financials would provide the first layer of clues, but there was something about Amanda's behavior that didn't sit right with Sarah. Amanda seemed shaken, yes, but there was a calmness beneath the surface, almost like she was expecting something like this to happen. Sarah decided to visit Nathan's business partner, Michael Ferris. If anyone knew the intricacies of Nathan's dealings, it would be Ferris. Cross Construction's headquarters was a sleek, modern building located in the heart of downtown Knightsbridge, a testament to the company's success and Nathan's vision. But as Sarah pulled into the parking lot, she noticed something odd: fewer cars than expected for a Monday afternoon. Inside the building, the mood was tense. The staff whispered to each other in hushed tones, clearly rattled by the news of their boss's disappearance. Michael Ferris, a tall, wiry man with thinning hair, met Sarah in the conference room. His face was lined with worry, and there was an edge of frustration in his voice when he spoke. "I don't know what's going on," Ferris said, pacing the room. "Nathan's been different lately. Ever since we landed that Civic Center contract, he's been acting like a man with a target on his back. He wasn't himself, paranoid, secretive." Sarah leaned forward, studying Ferris's face. Did he ever mention any threats? Anyone who might have wanted to harm him? Ferris hesitated. Not directly, but there were rumors. The kind of whispers that circulate when you're working on a project that big. Competitors were furious that we got the bid, especially after the delays. A few of them have connections, unsavory ones. Unsavory how? Sarah pressed. Ferris sighed. Nathan didn't like talking about it, but there were some powerful people behind those bids. People with influence, the kind you don't want to cross. He didn't seem worried at first, but as the project progressed, he got more cautious. Then, about a week ago, he started canceling meetings, avoiding calls. That's when I noticed the money transfer. Sarah's eyebrows raised. The $5 million to the offshore account? Ferris nodded. That's right. I didn't authorize it. I only found out this morning when I checked the company's financials. I don't know what he was planning, but something spooked him. Sarah sat back, her mind racing. Was Nathan running from someone? Or was he preparing for something bigger? Either way, it was clear that he had been involved in something far more dangerous than a simple construction deal gone wrong. That evening, Sarah returned to her temporary office at the Knightsbridge police station. Her desk was cluttered with files, reports, and notes from her interviews. She sat back in her chair, replaying the day's events in her mind. Nathan's behavior, the offshore accounts, the threats from competitors, everything pointed to something much larger than a missing persons case. She reached for her phone and dialed her contact at the Financial Crimes Division. If anyone could trace the money Nathan had transferred, it would be them. While she waited for the call to go through, her mind wandered to Amanda Cross. There was something about Amanda's calmness that unnerved Sarah. Women whose husbands went missing didn't usually maintain such composure, not unless they were hiding something. As the financial expert picked up the phone, Sarah quickly explained the situation. "I need you to look into a transfer of $5 million from Cross Construction to an offshore account," she said. "It was done last Friday, and I need to know where that money went." "Got it," the agent replied. "I'll dig into it and get back to you as soon as I can." Sarah hung up the phone, tapping her fingers on the desk as she thought. If Nathan had been moving money offshore, it could mean he was trying to disappear. But there was also the possibility that he had been forced into it. Blackmail, threats, even organized crime, all of it was on the table now. The next morning, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from the Financial Crimes Division. The money had been traced to a bank in the Cayman Islands, but the account holder was registered under a shell company with no clear ownership. It was a dead end for now, but Sarah wasn't giving up. As Sarah pored over the financial records, something caught her eye. A series of payments to a company she didn't recognize, listed under consulting services. The amounts were substantial, and the payments had been made regularly over the past year. It was unusual, to say the least, for a construction company to be paying so much for consulting, especially when there was no record of any consulting work being done. Curious, Sarah dug deeper, tracing the company back to an address in New York City. But when she looked it up, she found that the company didn't exist. It was a shell just like the offshore account. A sinking feeling settled in Sarah's stomach. Nathan Cross hadn't just been hiding money, he'd been laundering it. With this new information, Sarah knew she was onto something big. Laundering money through a construction company wasn't unheard of, but it pointed to involvement with organized crime, the kind of people who didn't hesitate to eliminate those who crossed them. She decided it was time to confront Amanda again. If anyone had noticed Nathan's behavior in the months leading up to his disappearance, it would be her. And Sarah was beginning to suspect that Amanda knew more than she was letting on. Back at the Cross mansion, Amanda greeted Sarah with a mix of exhaustion and wariness. Her perfect composure was beginning to crack. The media had been hounding her for interviews, and rumors were swirling about Nathan's business dealings. "Detective McLean," Amanda said, her voice tight, "have you found anything?" "We're still investigating," Sarah replied, stepping into the grand foyer. "But there are some things I'd like to clarify with you." Amanda led Sarah to the living room, where they sat opposite each other. The tension in the air was palpable. "You mentioned that Nathan had been stressed about the Civic Center project," Sarah began. "But there's more to it than that, isn't there? He was moving large sums of money offshore. Money that wasn't meant to be found." Amanda's eyes widened, and for the first time, Sarah saw genuine fear flicker across her face. "I don't know what you're talking about," Amanda said, her voice shaky. "Nathan handled all the finances. I didn't ask questions." "But you knew something was wrong," Sarah pressed. "He was hiding things from you, things that could put both of you in danger." Amanda hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the edge of the couch. I suspected. He was different these last few months. Nervous, paranoid. But he wouldn't tell me what was going on. I tried to talk to him, but he always shut me out." "And the threats?" Sarah asked. "Did you ever hear anything about who might be behind them?" Amanda swallowed hard. "No. Nathan was always so careful. But there was one night a few weeks ago, I heard him on the phone late at night. He was arguing with someone. He sounded scared." "Did you hear what was said?" "Only bits and pieces," Amanda admitted. He mentioned something about a deal, and that he didn't want to go through with it. The person on the other end must have said something that terrified him, because he slammed the phone down and didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. Sarah's mind raced. A deal gone wrong. It was exactly what she had suspected. Nathan had gotten involved with the wrong people, and now he was paying the price. Mrs. Cross, I need to know everything, Sarah said firmly. If you know who Nathan was dealing with, or if you have any idea where he might have gone, you need to tell me now. Because if we don't find him soon, he may not have a chance. Amanda's hands tightened around the couch, her knuckles white. I don't know where he is, she whispered. But I think he knew this was coming. He mentioned something about a safe house, but I don't know where. He never told me. A safe house. Sarah leaned forward, her pulse quickening. Where did he mention it? It was just in passing, Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper. One night, when he thought I wasn't listening, he was talking on the phone. He said something about laying low until it blew over. But I don't know where he was planning to go. Sarah's mind was racing. If Nathan had a safe house, it meant he was hiding from someone dangerous. And if they didn't find him soon, it might be too late. With the new information about the safe house, Sarah's investigation took on a new urgency. Nathan was on the run. But from whom? And more importantly, where had he gone? The details Amanda had provided were vague, but they were enough to give Sarah a lead. If Nathan had set up a safe house, he would have needed help. Someone who specialized in setting up discreet hideouts for people trying to disappear. Sarah's first stop was to interview a few contacts in the real estate world who might know something about off-the-books properties. One name kept coming up, Maddie Sandoval, a mysterious real estate broker who specialized in quiet transactions for high-profile clients. Maddie wasn't just a broker. She was someone who could arrange entire new lives for those who could afford it. If Nathan had gone underground, Maddie was the person who could have made it happen. Sarah tracked down Maddie to her office in Boston, a slick and minimalist space that screamed wealth and power. The woman who greeted her was every bit as polished as her surroundings. Late 40s, sharp eyes, and a cool smile that didn't reach her eyes. Detective McLean, Maddie said, extending her hand. I've heard about your investigation. What can I do for you? Sarah didn't waste time on pleasantries. I need to know if you've helped a man named Nathan Cross disappear. Maddie's smile remained, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Disappear? That's an interesting word choice. I deal in real estate, detective, not disappearances. Cut the act, Maddie, Sarah replied, her voice steady. We both know you handle more than just property sales. Nathan Cross is missing, and I have reason to believe he's gone underground. If you had anything to do with that, now's the time to come clean. For a moment, Maddie studied Sarah, as if weighing her options. Then, with a sigh, she leaned back in her chair. Fine. I did some work for Nathan a few months ago. He was nervous, asking for something off the radar. A property outside the city, something where no one could find him if things went south. But after that, I didn't hear from him again. I assumed whatever trouble he was in had passed. Where's the property? Sarah asked, her heart pounding. This could be the break she needed. Maddie hesitated. It's a small cabin, about 40 miles north of here. Very remote, no neighbors for miles. I'll give you the address, but if he's really hiding, don't expect a warm welcome. Sarah took the address, thanked Maddie, and left. She didn't waste any time heading toward the cabin. The roads grew narrower and rougher as she left the city behind, winding through dense woods and isolated stretches of land. By the time she reached the area, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the trees. The cabin was exactly as Maddie had described. Small, secluded, and surrounded by nothing but wilderness. Sarah parked her car a short distance away, her hand resting on her gun as she approached. The air was thick with tension, and every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the door, she knocked, but there was no response. She tried the handle, and to her surprise, it was unlocked. Slowly, she pushed the door open, her heart racing. The inside of the cabin was sparse, but it was clear that someone had been living there. There were food supplies, clothing scattered on the floor, and papers strewn across the small kitchen table. Sarah moved cautiously, scanning the room for any signs of life. And then she heard it, a soft creak from the back of the cabin. Her hand tightened on her gun as she moved toward the noise. The door to the back room was slightly ajar, and as she pushed it open, she came face to face with a man she hadn't expected to find so easily. Nathan Cross stood in the shadows, his face gaunt and his eyes filled with a mix of fear and exhaustion. He looked like a man who had been running for far too long. "Detective McLean," he said, his voice hoarse. "I was wondering when you'd find me." Nathan didn't make any sudden movements, but Sarah didn't lower her gun. There was something about him that didn't sit right. His calmness seemed almost rehearsed, as if he had been preparing for this moment. "Start talking," Sarah said, her voice steady. "What the hell is going on? Why did you disappear? And who are you hiding from?" Nathan let out a long breath, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It's a long story, detective, and I'm not sure you're going to like what you hear." "I've got time," Sarah replied, stepping forward cautiously but keeping her distance. Nathan sat down on the edge of the small bed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I made a mistake, a big one. I got involved with the wrong people, people who don't forgive easily." "What people?" Sarah demanded. "Is this about the money you've been laundering through Cross Construction?" Nathan's eyes widened, surprise flickering across his face. "So, you know about that?" "Of course I do," Sarah said, her patience wearing thin. "But I want to hear it from you. Start from the beginning." Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "It started a few years ago. Business was booming, but I wanted more. I got greedy. There was a group of investors, powerful, dangerous people, who approached me about some off-the-books projects. They needed a way to move money quietly, and they knew I had the resources to make it happen through the company." "So, you agreed?" Sarah asked, disgust edging into her voice. "I thought I could handle it," Nathan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But things spiraled out of control. The money kept coming in, and soon it wasn't just about laundering. They wanted more influence, control over city contracts, access to politicians. I was in too deep before I realized it. "And the Civic Center project?" Sarah asked, piecing it together. "That was the tipping point," Nathan said. "It was a massive deal, and the investors wanted it badly. When we won the bid, everything changed. They demanded more from me, more money, more risks, and when I tried to back out, they made it clear that wasn't an option." "They threatened you," Sarah said flatly. Nathan nodded. "They said they'd come after my family if I didn't cooperate. I couldn't risk it. So, I started moving money offshore, planning to disappear before they could make good on their threats. But they found out, and that's when everything fell apart." Sarah processed his words, her mind racing. "Who are they, Nathan? Who's pulling the strings?" Nathan's face darkened. "You don't want to know. These aren't just local criminals, detective. They have connections everywhere, politicians, law enforcement, even the justice system. If you get too close, they'll bury you." Sarah's gut twisted. She had suspected corruption, but this was far bigger than she had imagined. "So what now? You think you can just hide out here forever?" "I don't know," Nathan said, his voice filled with despair. "I thought I could outrun them, but I'm running out of options." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was a message from the station. "New development. Need you back ASAP." She sighed, knowing she'd have to leave for now. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As Sarah drove back to Knightsbridge, her mind was spinning with the weight of Nathan's confession. The corruption ran deeper than she had imagined, and now she was in the middle of it. But before she could focus on her next move, the new development at the station loomed over her. When she arrived at the station, Chief Murray was waiting for her. His expression was grim. "We've got a problem," he said, handing her a file. "We found a body." Sarah's heart sank. "Who?" "Michael Ferris," Murray replied, his voice heavy. "Nathan's business partner." Sarah flipped open the file and scanned the report. Ferris had been found dead in his home, an apparent suicide, at least that's what it had been staged to look like. But the bruises on his wrists and the angle of the gunshot told a different story. "Someone took him out," Sarah said, her voice cold. "Looks that way," Murray agreed. "And I think we both know why." Sarah clenched her jaw. Ferris had known too much, and now he was dead. The people Nathan had been running from weren't just a threat to him anymore. They were cleaning up loose ends, and anyone connected to the case was at risk, including her. Sarah knew that time was running out. Nathan's enemies were closing in, and if she didn't act fast, more people would die. But going after them would require more than just a badge and a gun. She needed to play smart, and she needed allies. The first step was getting Nathan into protective custody, but convincing him wouldn't be easy. She returned to the cabin the next morning, hoping that Nathan hadn't already made a run for it. When she arrived, she found Nathan pacing the floor, looking more haggard than the day before. "They killed Ferris, didn't they?" he asked, his voice hollow. Sarah nodded. "They're tying up loose ends. You're next if we don't move fast." Nathan collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I can't believe it's come to this. We need to get you into protective custody," Sarah said firmly. "It's the only way to keep you safe long enough to testify. Once we have enough evidence, we can bring these people down." Nathan looked up at her, his eyes filled with doubt. "You really think we can stop them?" "It's the only chance you've got," Sarah replied. "But I can't do it without you." After a long silence, Nathan finally nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. Sarah worked with the state police to set up a safe house for Nathan, while also gathering every piece of evidence she could find to connect the investors to the money laundering scheme. It wasn't easy. The investors had covered their tracks well, but Sarah was determined. The showdown came sooner than she expected. Late one night, as Sarah was reviewing case files in her apartment, her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "We know where he is." Her blood ran cold. They had found Nathan. Without wasting a second, Sarah grabbed her gun and raced to the safe house. When she arrived, the front door was ajar, and the unmistakable signs of a struggle littered the hallway. She moved cautiously, her weapon drawn, and entered the living room. Nathan was gone. But before Sarah could process the situation, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, her gun raised, and came face to face with a man dressed in black, his expression cold and unfeeling. "Step aside, detective," he said calmly, holding a silenced pistol in his hand. "This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't," Sarah snapped, keeping her gun steady. "Where's Nathan?" The man smirked. "He's where he needs to be. This is your last warning, McLean. Walk away or you'll end up like the others." But Sarah wasn't about to back down. In a split second, she fired, the shot echoing through the house as the man fell to the floor. Sarah rushed to his side, checking his pulse, dead. But Nathan was still missing. In the days that followed, the fallout from the case sent shockwaves through Knightsbridge. With the help of Sarah's investigation, state and federal authorities launched a massive operation to dismantle the criminal network behind Nathan's disappearance. Arrests were made, corrupt politicians were exposed, and Nathan's name was cleared. But Nathan himself was never found. Some believed he had fled to another country, using his offshore accounts to disappear for good. Others speculated that the people who had been after him had finally caught up. But Sarah knew the truth. Nathan had vanished, and the secrets he had carried with him were buried deeper than any investigation could uncover. As Sarah stood on the hill overlooking the Cross Mansion, now vacant and quiet, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly the end. The town of Knightsbridge had always been good at hiding its darkest secrets, and despite everything she had uncovered, there were still shadows she couldn't touch. Because in Knightsbridge, the truth never stayed buried for long. Months later, as Sarah sat in her office, she received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photograph of Nathan Cross, standing in a crowded marketplace in some foreign city. He was alive, living under a new identity, just as she had suspected. But attached to the photo was a note, written in neat, anonymous handwriting. It's not over. Sarah knew then that the game wasn't finished. Nathan might have escaped for now, but the people he had crossed wouldn't rest until they found him. And neither would she.